Tracy, thanks for joining me here on the floor of a MedTech conference.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
You've been super busy too. We were just talking about that. You sit on a couple of the boards of AdvaMed?
I do. I sit on the Excel board. I've been on that board for about 3 years. This is the board of the smaller companies, I think up to 100 employees. And then I also sit on the executive board and the executive committee. So lots going on.
You getting any time for yourself?
No, but that's not what this. Well, actually, I think.
It's,
I think that. I mean, I'm seeing 3,000 of my best friends. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. This industry tends to support that. Like, people become friends in here. There's no competitors.
I agree with that.
Right?
I think we've learned. I think someone said it beautifully from the podium yesterday. We've learned that we share more in common than we have apart, and it makes sense to collaborate.
Yeah. So share a little bit about Materna, and then I want to sort of dive into the women's health, fem health category and things being done there now.
Yeah. So Materna, our tagline is we empower women to protect and restore their pelvic health. We have one product called Millie on the market for a high-tone pelvic floor disorder. It's got OTC clearance just this year. And we have a really exciting product in a huge randomized controlled trial in obstetrics, aiming to reduce pelvic floor injury during childbirth. We're really trying to change the standard of care in labor and delivery.
And that fem health category, while, look, 50%, and I got flies in here, 50%, 50% of, our population, female. I think females make 80% of the decisions in the household
I've read that,
on healthcare, right?
I think we can all kind of relate, right?
Right, and then, but yet, there's still a little bit of a headwind on that, and I'm sure there's a number of reasons why, but what have you run into as a leader in MedTech and a leader of a women's health company?
Yeah, well, I think there are a bunch of different issues. So the roots of medical, so I'm an engineer by training, and I think the roots of our industry are in engineering. So if you think about, the 1940s and 50s and 60s, most engineers were men, right? So our industry does bias in that direction. And I think as we're innovating, we innovate on what we understand. So I think some of that's normal. And then I think there were also some decisions that were made, if you remember thalidomide, the birth defects that happened in the 1960s, there were decisions made to exclude women from clinical research. And so there actually hasn't been a lot of research until quite recently. The standards have changed since 2016, so really just in the last few years, that we're including women in clinical research. And then I think there's also some societal headwinds where maybe women aren't as comfortable talking to doctors about some of their more intimate issues, and then things don't get aired and they don't get invested and they don't get researched. And then strategics are looking around for what to invest in, and there aren't a whole lot of assets on the market. So it's time to change that.
I like that. That's it's pretty straight line thinking for an engineer. One engineer talking to another.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's interesting when you think about that is investors usually like to invest in things that they can totally understand and maybe resonate with them. So I don't know, what is it, about 88% of the VCs are men. And then to your point, if we're not familiar with an issue, it doesn't get the attention it should.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, or the consideration. I think things have changed a lot in the last just 2 or 3 years. So I'm not the founder of Materna, but when I took over to take these products to market in 2019, I would say I was still getting some investors saying, women's health is a niche. But we closed a $20 million Series B last year, and I don't think I talked to a single investor who was not keenly aware that they were underallocated in women's health and a little embarrassed about it. So I think they're now really beginning to look for opportunities. I think the media has made enough of an issue of it that it's a little embarrassing for some funds to just stay in some of these more old-fashioned thinking patterns.
And also, it's been my sort of observations that some of the strategics will be at arm's length on some fem health technologies because of some less than optimal outcomes that have occurred to, obviously, the female patient contingency, lawsuits, right? So when they have to look at things, they've got to obviously have a responsibility to their shareholders is to say, what's the handicap on that potentially from a liability perspective, whether we're talking about mesh or talcum or implants or any of that. You don't have to agree or disagree with me on that.
No, those are facts. Yeah, a lot of the strategics have stepped back from women's health, at least the initial plays they did, but I don't think that's where the story ends. I think that's the end of a chapter, and I think that we're well into a new chapter. And linking back to something that you asked earlier, I would say the average age of VCs now, they're more the Gen X, even millennial, right? And they're much more open about with their wives. And I think actually it's quite common in their experience that their wives do have high-tone pelvic floor disorders, they have painful sex, they have urinary incontinence, they have prolapse, and they know it. So I've had men share a lot of details about some of those things. I do think that VC do understand that these are big issues. But when we think about in my company's area of pelvic health, the pelvic mesh would probably be the biggest eyesore on the MedTech industry. And it's not a great technology, it's not a great situation. And I think this is where Materna has had an opportunity to really set itself apart, that we're trying to prevent all of those conditions with an intervention in obstetrics. And if you've been watching the news on maternal outcomes, it's an embarrassment in our country. And so you take those two intersections, and I think Materna is beautifully positioned. I think that's why we've been as successful as we've been, Fast Company and Forbes and those kinds of things. But I do think that for companies that are just trying to do a Me Too in fixing broken pelvic floors, I think that's a tough spot right now.
I'm seeing some, and you and I were chatting about it beforehand, I'm seeing some, when we talk about underrepresentation within MedTech, we certainly have MedTech women, we have MedTech color, right? And the industry rallies around that underrepresentation. And there's also a bit of a support coming on now with a higher awareness around fem health and the products and why they should become front and center as well. Is that not right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I give AdvaMed a lot of credit for doubling down, and the Mullings Group for supporting it. I think we know that when our teams look like the patients we serve, we're going to have better empathy, we're going to have better ideas. Instead of pushing out what I'm projecting of my reality onto the world, I actually work with my team and come up with something better. But I think also AdvaMed's putting in some infrastructure to actually support it, and I think they're putting their money where their mouth is, and I think that's so important. And I'm thrilled as a board member to be leading the Women's Health Equity Initiative that's just launching at AdvaMed now. And we've had 15 member companies step forward, and these are companies that don't necessarily position themselves as women's health companies. I mean, certainly mine, I'm an OBGYN, of course my company is a women's health company, but we have surgical robotics companies and diagnostic companies that wouldn't necessarily say, oh, that's the only thing I do. But the first thing that we're going to do on the subcommittee that I lead is assemble all the wins that we have. We're doing more in women's health than we even give ourselves credit for. And I think it's the right direction in this new chapter where, maybe 30 years from now, women's health won't even be a thing. It'll just be health, right? You might still have gynecology and urology, but it wouldn't be women's and men's health, right? It's just healthcare that's equitable.
And I love that because even when we go to straight down the middle, when we look at cardiovascular health, women respond different than men do. Mm-hmm. And they actually have a larger liability within cardiovascular health than men do. And the same thing in the osteosciences, right? So they respond differently. Mm-hmm. So the entire industry should be dialed into those differences.
Absolutely.
Rather than monolithically looking at a category.
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. First, you're going to get better outcomes, right? And everybody wants better outcomes. But it's also a huge market opportunity, right? It's a lift in the beginning, and my company's feeling this. It's expensive to do clinical education as a medical device company, but it's what we do, right? It's part of our obligation. If you're going to try to change the standard of care and really innovate, we have to work with delivery providers as well to really change the way we even think about these things. And I think, and I think you do too, that having that inclusive lens actually opens up markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. And as a leader in a MedTech organization, independent of being a leader in a MedTech fem health focus, what can we do as MedTech participants and as MedTech leaders that we aren't even thinking about right now?
Oh, like the white space?
Yeah. What could we be doing? What could we be doing as an owner or a leader of a corporation, big or small, in order to help that move forward?
Well, I am a big advocate of the ecosystem, and for a lot of years, I've seen places where we have silos everybody loses, right? I think, for example, in the trades, the United States does not have a strong education talent pipeline in the trades, and it's cost us a lot in terms of our onshore manufacturing, right? We have to have people who know how to do things with their hands. And in talent management, it's just something a lot of folks don't even think about. And then similarly, when we think about the talent pipeline of diverse, I like the word proverse. Someone said that,
I like that.
in the Women's Executive Network reception this week, and I hadn't heard that, the proverse, right? When you're really including everybody. And that also means in the adjacencies to other industries. You know, what are other industries already figuring out that MedTech, because we've been so siloed in the way we do things, and it is complicated what we do, so I understand why we think we're so smart. But there are other industries that do hard things too, and I think if we open some of those adjacencies, we'd have a lot more at our disposal.
I'm going to steal Proverse moving forward.
I know, it wasn't mine, but pass it on.
It's really good.
Yeah.
So what should we be looking for from Materna over the next 6, 12, 18 months?
Thank you for asking. Well, we just got over-the-counter clearance on our first product, so we'll double revenues this year, and we're off to the races, really trying to change that standard of care and get the message out that vaginismus is a treatable condition. It's also very common, affects up to 17% of American women. You've never heard of it, I bet.
I have never heard of it.
A lot of women that have it haven't heard of it, so look it up. But it's on hellomillie.com. And then our second product I think is super exciting. This is the one that's trying to change the standard of care in labor and delivery, so we'll be publishing some data on that, but I can't say more than that right now.
Going to be a little stealth on me, are you?
Yeah.
All right, well, I appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Joe Mullings from the floor of MedTech Conference in Anaheim. Be well.